Antifa scores its first martyr or terrorist? Depends on who you ask. Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America. Well, I have long been in battle with Antifa and its ideologues. I've got a friend who is, at minimum, we'll say, sympathetic to Antifa's cause and methodology. Of course, Antifa is ironically named anti-fascist. And these people supposedly have no leader because they're supposedly anarchists. So by definition, they supposedly have no leader. But they run the gamut from protesting and counter-protesting, which, by the way, are good things. Counter-protest is important because that's the essence of America. You take your ideas out into the public square and then you debate them. That's the warp and woof of what makes America, in my mind, the greatest country on the planet, ever. But, so that's the docile side of Antifa, but they also run the gamut to, as you can see here, violence. This is them attacking Mr. No for being a bad person. Now, what's interesting is I brought this up to a couple Antifa sympathizers in our call-in show, and none of them would condemn this. I had one friend who is not an Antifa supporter who said, yeah, we shouldn't have done that, we shouldn't victim blame, but he's not part of Antifa, and he never supported them. But I have explicit people who've explicitly supported these folks, and they refuse to come out and condemn the action of assaulting this reporter. And I said, in the next 6 months, somebody's gonna die. You can see that in my most recent video that speaks about Antifa, where I'm dealing with these people, and I said, in the next 6 months, you guys are going to get somebody killed. Well, I was wrong, because not 7 days after I made that statement, it happened. Mr. Van Sprossen, I'm not going to go into the exact details of this individual's names or whatever, because I don't want to glorify this individual, and quite frankly, I feel bad for him, actually. Because he's obviously he was obviously not a mentally stable individual. But be that as it may, here's what happened. Mr. Van Sprossen, who in his manifesto, you can read it. I'm not going to link it, but I'm looking at it right now. In his manifesto, basically said he couldn't stand by while his country was filling its concentration camps with the disenfranchised. Now, this language comes straight from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her cohorts. I just think it's historically inaccurate to try to compare a detention facility where people are coming into the country with the same type of language of people who tried to flee a country. You do realize that many Jews tried to flee Nazi Germany when it became clear that they were up for extermination, and they were held in the country against their will and then forced to work. As a matter of fact, it says, I forgot what the first word, but it says something macht frei, work makes freedom, I think is at the top of Auschwitz as you go in. To compare a detention facility where people are trying to get into a country, and by the way, I'm an open borders guy. So I'm more radical than pretty much anybody I know, because I believe we should have open borders and that our line is an arbitrary line, and that we should be a welcoming country. But even I know that a detention facility, most people are not for open borders, Democrat or Republican. Most people don't want completely open borders, and if that's the case, if we don't have completely open borders, then by necessity you have got to have detention facilities, right? because you got to do something about people who come in here illegally. Now, I'm putting illegally in quotes because I don't believe that we should have those laws, but those laws are still currently on the book. When that terrorist went over there and shot up that synagogue because of invaders, you remember that? He said, I'm not going to sit by while these people invade my country, and he shot up the synagogue. You know who I blamed? I blamed Mr. Trump. You know why I blame President Trump? Because he is responsible for the rhetoric that he spewed. And you got a country of 350 million very impressionable people. And if you're in a position of leadership and authority, you got to be very, very careful about the rhetoric you use. Didn't I say that? That's what I said. So I went after Trump for his rhetoric out in the public forum, and I put that squarely on his shoulders. I blame him for it. Well, guess what? Miss Ocasio-Cortez, when you walk around calling detention facilities, fallaciously by the way, concentration camps, then as the reporter said, what's wrong with firebombing a concentration camp? Nothing. It's the right thing to do. If it was a concentration camp, it's not, Miss Cortez. And so now, this man's death and the deaths that are likely to follow because people are dumb and impressionable are on your hands because you characterize this place as a concentration camp, and it's not. And this is not coming from somebody who wants to defend the Trump administration, and this is not coming from somebody who wants immigrants out of America. I want more immigrants in America. I think we should have open borders. But you were wrong. You shouldn't have called it a concentration camp. You just militarized a group of people who don't know anything about the world. It's a dangerous game that we're playing. It's 2019. You don't get to come out and say crazy stuff out there and not take responsibility for it. So look, the synagogue shooter, I blame Trump. This thing, I blame Ms. Cortez. She's dead wrong here. She was absolutely wrong. Terrible. Now again, this is complete hypocrisy from the left because it was Barack Hussein Obama. We know that now. Barack Hussein Obama was the one that built these concentration camps. Barack Hussein Obama was the one that told everybody, don't come here with your kids. Obama said that. So if we were really conscientious and really didn't want concentration camps in our country, then we would have said that during the Obama administration. Why we didn't, I'm still not sure. But be that as it may, this language gets thrown around, and this individual, Mr. Vance Brosnan, this is from BuzzFeed. Before attacking the facility, Mr. Vance Brosnan sent a letter to friends that he entitled A Written Manifesto, which detailed his motivation to take action against the forces of evil, especially fascism and concentration camps. This brother then went with his modified AR-15, which is very interesting. He took his modified AR-15, stormed a nice facility. Mr. Vance Brosnan reportedly threw his incendiary devices at the building as well as at several vehicles in a parking lot, setting them ablaze. He also reportedly attempted to ignite a propane tank. This is a guy who obviously has no tactical training whatsoever. And this is the thing that gets me about Antifa. If you watch, Joe Rogan made this observation. If you watch even the way that they were attacking this, the reporter, Mr. No, you could tell that these people were not formally trained in any sort of combat sports. And just looking at this, I can tell that this individual is not trained at all in tech. Do you realize, Mr. Vance Brosnan, he can't hear me now, but to anybody who would want to replicate his idea, if he was successful in igniting that propane tank and turning that facility into a fireball, the only people that would have been seriously wounded would have been the migrants. You do realize that, especially if you're, believe me, I know, if you're part of any federal alphabet group, let's say it that way, if you're part of any alphabet group, you are trained constantly as to how to respond when you are attacked. You were trained constantly about exits. These people who went and responded to Mr. Van Sprassen did it automatically because they've been going through those drills over and over and over again. And if it got to the place where the propane tank actually was ignited, believe me, those ICE agents would have been out of there just fine. And the only people who really would have been suffering would have been the people behind the cages. They would have burned to death Mr. Van Sprassen. You would have condemned those people to a horrible, horrible fate if those ICE agents would have put a bullet in your head before you're able to do that foolishness. But, you know, this is one of these good-intentioned. The guy obviously played a bunch of 007 video games when he was a kid, okay? Whatever the justification was, everybody knows that it is literally impossible for one guy to go in there and do that type of thing. It just displays the tragedy of this entire situation. That a guy can think that he's going to show up with his modified little AR and a couple Molotov cocktails, and he really thinks he would be able to do anything to this facility other than put the lives of those people in danger. Those ICE agents are all geared up, they're all suited up, they're all Kevlar'd up, they're completely fine. Nothing's going to happen to them. This is for anybody else trying to replicate his stupid idea. You will get good people, innocent people killed. Since you want to demonize everybody in ICE, many of whom, by the way, are the children of immigrants. That's the other thing. My brother works in one of these. I've got a family member that is pretty connected. And I asked him, "Tell me about ICE." He said those are stand-up guys. Now look, the particular facility that Mr. Van Sprassen raided was a for-profit detention facility. I am 1 trillion megillion% against privately owned detention facilities. I am against, I think it was Tulsi that basically said we need to get rid of this whole prison industrial complex. I'm 1000% against it. And the way that you shut those facilities down is not by firebombing them, thereby necessitating more security for them. The way that you shut them down is you expose it in the public sphere, you talk about it over and over again, you do exposés on it, and you bring it to the American people. What you don't do is this dumbness. Now you've just succeeded in making yourself look stupid, and like I said, I would have loved for this brother to have gotten out of this conflict alive. But if somebody had to die, then it should have been him. And, you know, here's what I'll say about Mr. Van Sprassen, though. It was definitely an act of terror. And normally what you're supposed to say is people who commit acts of terror are cowardly. But it's the same. I'll say the same thing I said about Malaki al-Hassan, the guy who stormed Fort Hood. Fort Hood is a place where it's a military outpost, and this guy was an Islamic radical, and he committed an act of war. I don't think that's cowardly. I don't think that what this guy did was cowardly. It wasn't. It was misguided. It was terrible, but it wasn't cowardly. It certainly wasn't the same species of violence that we saw when they were beating the hell out of that reporter, because they knew that this guy probably wouldn't be able to defend himself. This guy, and if you read his manifesto, it's pretty clear that he knew that he was not going to make it out alive. So from that perspective, I say, okay, this man had the courage of his convictions. Here's the problem, though, Antifa. The vast majority of you are not like that. The vast majority of you are not suicidal crazy people who want to go out in a blaze of glory. That's not how the most of you are. Most of you in Antifa are soft, cowardly, petulant, coddled little white kids who read some Lenin, and now all of a sudden you believe you're a revolutionary. You don't want any smoke like this. Here's the problem. You just crossed a line. Your man just crossed the line. He brought you guys into, now you guys can be credibly called a domestic terror outfit. That's what he's done. You guys are now, if you're anticipating, because this guy explicitly said in his manifesto, I'm looking at it now, I am Antifa. You're now a domestic terror outfit. There's no way in the world, if Antifa is not a domestic terror group, then the word domestic terror means nothing. Can you imagine what would be happening in the media right now if the guy's name was Bubba Gump and he had a Confederate flag on his Facebook profile and he was saying he was doing this because he wanted to get all the wetbacks out of America? What do you think would happen? What do you think would be... Do you think that there'd be anything in CNN other than that story right now? What is CNN covering? Oh, Mr. Trump said some mean tweets. He said some mean stuff to Ilhan Omar and Ocasio-Cortez. That needs to be on the front page. Speaking of which, Miss Omar, a couple days ago, she was asked about her opinion on the individual who did this. And here's a conversation.
Will you condemn the Antifa attack in Washington over the weekend? It's easy to condemn terrorism. Will you condemn it?
Is it clear?
Antifa firebombed a facility in Tacoma over the weekend. It's an ICE facility. Will you condemn them for that? I mean, firebombing a concentration camp is kind of a laudable thing. If it actually is a concentration camp, you must be happy that they did it, no? Are you pleased? Should more people do it? It's easy to say no.
Yes, here, I think this is it.
It's really easy to say no.
Now, if you're a leftist or whatever, don't immediately go after me. I shot a 20-minute video defending Ilhan when everybody went after her because of her "some people did something" comment about 9/11. I defended her stridently. Here, though, she's dead wrong. She refused to condemn the Antifa terrorist attack that just happened. And yet, her and her other three folks in the squad led the charge to draft a congressional condemnation of Trump's tweets. Let me say that again, ladies and gentlemen. This guy took up arms against a United States facility and committed a terrorist act that put hundreds of vulnerable people in mortal danger, where they could have died from fire and smoke inhalation. No comment. But Trump sends a tweet and tells her to go back to Somalia. It's the end of the world. Does that make sense to you? Does that make sense to you? How come she couldn't vocalize any critiques of this action? You know, I naively jumped on my call-in show, one of these supporters of this terrorist organization, and I said, hey man, here's your chance to publicly condemn the attack on this gay immigrant reporter. And he refused to do so. So I'm not even going to naively ask for any of the folks who coddle these people to condemn these actions, because it's clear to me that they're completely fine with committing violent acts against people they disagree with. That's obvious. And so, at least what you can say for Miss Omar is that she's not a liar. Because if she condemned it, it's obvious that her heart is with this stuff. This is unbelievable stuff. Furthermore, Shaun King, aka Talcum X. Let's see what Talcum X said. I mean, this stuff is unbelievable. Now, he has since deleted this stuff from his social media. So you have to love Middle America for our constant diligence to report the news. But here's what Shaun King said. We are told that this is the final letter of William Vance Brosnan, who was shot and killed by law enforcement as he attempted an attack on a for-profit refugee detention center in Tacoma, Washington. It's a beautiful, painful, devastating letter. He wasn't crazy. Inaction is. Are you crazy? This man committed a terrorist attack that put these people in mortal danger, Shaun King. What do you mean by inaction is crazy? Does that mean that other people should follow in this man's footsteps? Because you just said inaction was crazy. So what does that mean? Does it mean that it's crazy for us not to continue to do these attacks on government facilities? Is that what you're saying? This is where William was murdered this weekend. This is Shaun King again. His actions will be called terrorism. That's because it's terrorism. And people will call him crazy. But neither are true. His mind was very clear. He is now arm in arm with John Brown. These camps must be shut down. Stop it. Now I'm insulted. Because Talcum X, you're not really, I don't really think you're a brother, but let's say that you are. John Brown was liberating slaves, people who were forcibly brought here against their will and consent, who were being systemically lynched. And John Brown was leading the charge to free those people. This is not the same thing. Now again, I'm for open borders, but you cannot compare slavery, people who were dragged here against their will, concentration camps, people who were dragged into that concentration camp against their will, to people who go into a country against the country's will. It's like literally the opposite thing. Good night. But either way, the audacity of these people to put something like that online is insane to me. It's absolutely insane. So there's Talcum X. And of course, what was Antifa's response to this? You know, because when the crazy people that handed the Democrats that win, when 2 days before the I think it was the primaries were going on, they sent all those bombs and basically gifted the Democrats the votes. All the Republicans came out and said, we condemn this, this is not what we're about. Trump said this is crazy, this is not what we're about. So then Antifa, based in Seattle, which is part of the organization that Mr. Vance Brosnan was part of, surely they're going to come out and condemn the action. Here's what they said. Seattle Anti-Fascist Action. When our good friend and comrade William Vance Brosnan took a stand against a fascist detention center in Tacoma, he became a martyr who gave his life to the struggle against fascism. He was kind and deeply loved by many communities. We cannot let his death go unanswered. Throughout history, we idolize figures like John Brown. We've just demonstrated how it's a terrible analogy. For their courage to take the ultimate stand against oppression, today we stand strong in our support of yet another martyr in the struggle against fascism. May his death serve as a call to protest and direct action. This is a terrorist organization calling other people to commit similar acts of terror. Explain to me, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, why these people are still around. I mean, we're deplatforming people like Alex Jones, Brother Minister Louis Farrakhan, Varg, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. There's Varg over there in some European plane somewhere talking about how Europe belongs to Europeans. That guy needs to be deplatformed. That guy needs to be. But these people who are calling for more actions that endanger more American and non-American lives, that is okay. Is that right? Am I figuring this out? Alex Jones, that guy is dangerous, but these guys are okay. These people in the last 2 weeks have put their hands and attempted to kill people who disagree with them. But they're not deplatformed. But Minister Farrakhan is deplatformed. Varg is deplatformed. This is amazing. How many people has Richard Spencer come out in public and said we should go out and kill and do direct action against? See, this is why this deplatforming stuff and the free speech. I mean, first of all, everybody knows there's an incitement exception for free speech, right? You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You can't advocate to incite to murder somebody. That's what these people are doing. It's a call to protest and direct action. Somebody tell me what direct action means in this historical context. When you write about a martyr who stormed a facility with a semi-automatic rifle and Molotov cocktails intending to do damage, and then you say he needs to serve as an inspiration to do more direct action, that means they're saying to other people, you need to do this too. That's an incitement toward violence against the United States. Do you not see that? So Vox recently published this on July 1, before the attack, and it's, I'm a left-wing anarchist. Guns aren't just for right-wingers. And then it talks about, you know, how leftist anarchists need to start stockpiling weapons. What are these people trying to do? Trying to get us into a civil war? Furthermore, leftists, if you think that going down to Walmart and getting yourself a gun makes you now equal to people who have been shooting since they've been born, people who have been getting 9mm onesies since they were babies, if you think now it's equal because you have a gun, you're mistaken. The people that you're going up against, I'm not fans of these people, but they've been shooting all their life. Many of them have military experience and have actually done damage and seen some sort of combat. Just because you have a gun doesn't mean a damn thing. But I don't even understand what Vox is trying to accomplish here. It just seems to me that these people on the left are dead set on getting us into a civil war. This is crossing the line, and it seems to me that leftists have no idea where the line is. When you start attacking, physically assaulting a reporter on camera, and it's there, and you try to defend it, and then one of your friends goes off and commits a terrorist action, and you defend it, or you turn him into a martyr as Shaun King has done, or you refuse to condemn it like Ilhan Omar did. You guys are writing the blueprint for Trump 2020. I don't understand how you don't see that. This is not the way that we're going to accomplish this. And by the way, speaking of John Brown, I'm not a fan of John Brown. John Brown, again, was a white guy. He used violent acts to liberate slaves. Even though those were not the same thing, as a Christian, I'm not for violent intervention. Hello, England was able to free their slaves without killing 600,000 of each other. So if you bring up John Brown, that still doesn't bode well for our country. John Brown's actions were part and parcel, at least in the micro level, of what brought us into the Civil War. I'd rather not have another Civil War. Again, the immigration issue is nothing compared to the slavery issue. And what I'm saying is, I didn't even want a civil war for slavery. William Wilberforce already showed us in England that we could free slaves without killing each other. So I definitely don't want another civil war over this immigration thing. They're not the same thing in human injustice. That's number one. And number two, we can solve this problem without killing people. And our own countrymen at that. Because if this fool would have been successful, not only would he likely have killed some innocent immigrants who were just trying to have a better life, but he also would have killed ICE agents who, by the way, are still American citizens. You do still love your country. You do still have some sort of affection for your country, even if you disagree with them, don't you? Why don't you talk to somebody who's actually in ICE? I mean, they're accessible, they're available, and have them tell you what their day is like. Have them tell you about the disgusting cartel person who smuggles his drugs in the anal cavity of his 6-year-old niece, which is a story I directly heard from an ICE operator. You go and listen to these people and their stories before you lazily and stupidly pin the Nazi terminology to them. Look, I'm angry. Look, I'm not angry necessarily about the ICE people, because like I said, they're trained and their training kicked in and they took care of business. What I'm angry about is that there seems to be forces on the left and the right dead set on tearing our country apart and are dead set on civil war. And I don't like that. I love my country. I don't want to see civil war. I don't want my leftist friends hurt. I don't want people who take advantage of the youthful idealism of young people to deploy these people into situations that are going to stoke up a civil war in my country. You idiots in Antifa don't know what the hell you're doing, and you don't know what the hell you're playing around with. You don't. And this is complete hypocrisy on left-wing media. Like I said, if it would have been Bubba Gump who did this in a Confederate shirt, you guys would be all over the place talking about how horrible Trump is. But nobody wants to hold leftists accountable. And if you love your country and you're part of this Antifa stuff, keep it to protesting. I'm not even saying that you need to disavow all your friends. I'm saying keep it to protesting. The minute you get physical, it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. I'm telling you, it's a bad idea. You're not going to go up against the United States government and the right wing of America and come out on top. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. Anyway, big thing here is a couple things. One, I am 1,000% against privatized detention facilities. I'm 100% against that. It's a moral evil. I'm against that. I am for open borders. I am an open border guy. But the way that we handle those issues is we protest them in public and we debate them in public. That's why I've got debates on abortion on my channel. Why? I know it's a public evil, but I'm not going to go bomb an abortion clinic. I'm going to have a debate about abortion, and I'm going to make the person who is supporting that action go watch the debate yourself. That's how you solve these issues in the country. You don't go and take matters into your own hands. You don't bomb an abortion clinic. You don't firebomb an ICE facility. You have these debates in public. And no, John Brown, you don't set fire to a bunch of fields, which then just results in a bunch of black slaves getting hung and killed when there's a non-violent way to solve that problem. All right. Well, love your neighbor. Take care of each other. Middle America, we are the media. Till next time, guys.